You have never really been part of this family. Helen's voice cut through the lawyer's oak-paneled office like broken glass, each word designed to slice deeper than the last. Sophia sat frozen in the leather chair, her 3-year-old daughter Zara fidgeting on her lap, completely unaware that their world was crumbling in real time. "Mrs. Henderson, perhaps we should," the estate attorney began, his discomfort visible as he shuffled through papers that had just destroyed a young woman's life. "No." Helen's manicured hand slammed against the mahogany table, her wedding ring, Martin's ring, catching the afternoon light streaming through windows Sophia would never be allowed to look through again. She needs to hear this. Martin may have felt obligated to provide for his mistake, but I certainly don't. The word mistake landed like a physical blow. Sophia's arms tightened around Zara, whose small fingers were playing with the worn fabric of Sophia's only good dress. The black one she'd bought for her father's funeral 3 weeks ago and couldn't afford to replace. Helen's ice-blue eyes fixed on Sophia with the same calculated cruelty that had followed her through childhood, through every dinner where she sat at the edge of the family table, through every Christmas morning where her gifts were practical while her step-siblings unwrapped luxury. The house, the investments, the business holdings, the trust funds, everything goes to my biological children. As it should have from the beginning. Sophia's throat felt like it was closing. 20 years of trying to earn a place in this family, of being the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the caretaker who visited Martin every weekend when his health started failing because she was the only one who still saw him as more than just a wallet. 20 years of believing that love could be earned if she just tried hard enough. However, Helen continued, reaching into her designer purse with the theatrical precision of someone who enjoyed inflicting pain, Martin was sentimental about certain things. She pulled out a small cardboard box, battered and held together with tape. His neckties. He specifically requested that you receive his neckties. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Henderson, I feel I should mention that Mr. Henderson's original will from 2019 is irrelevant," Helen snapped. "The most recent will, executed just 6 months ago, supersedes everything." Martin was very clear about his final wishes. Her smile was poison wrapped in pearls. "Weren't you, darling?" She was talking to Martin as if he could hear her, as if his spirit was standing in this room watching his daughter's humiliation. Sophia wondered if he could see this, if he knew what Helen had done the moment the doctors said he wouldn't recover from the stroke. "Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button because tomorrow I have an even more special story for you, and I do not want you to miss it." Sophia took the box with trembling hands. Inside were 15 silk ties, all perfectly folded, all carrying the faint scent of her father's cologne. She recognized every single one, had helped him choose the blue one for parent-teacher conferences, the burgundy for her high school graduation, the black silk for his wedding anniversary dinners with Helen. Each tie represented a moment when Martin had tried to show up for her in the only ways Helen would allow. "And now," Helen stood, smoothing her designer skirt, "I need you to understand something very clearly. You are not welcome in our home. You are not welcome at family gatherings. You are not a Henderson. You never were." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt like ice water. "Your mother was a mistake Martin made before he knew better, and you are the living reminder of that mistake. I've spent 20 years pretending otherwise, and I'm done." Zara looked up at Sophia with wide brown eyes, Martin's eyes, sensing the tension but unable to understand why Mama was crying. "Mama? Go home now." "Home?" Sophia almost laughed at the cruel irony. Where was home for a woman who'd just been erased from the only family she'd ever known? The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Henderson, I'm sorry, Miss Robinson. You do understand you have the right to contest this will if you believe there were irregularities in its execution? With what money?" Helen's laugh was sharp enough to cut skin. "She's working 2 jobs just to keep that apartment. Do you really think she can afford to fight us? Our legal team costs more per hour than she makes in a month." It was true. Sophia cleaned office buildings at night and worked retail during the day. Every dollar stretched to cover rent, daycare, groceries, the endless expenses of raising a child alone. Fighting a will revision would require lawyers she couldn't afford, time she didn't have, and resources that had never existed in her world. She stood on unsteady legs, the box of ties clutched against her chest like armor. I understand. Good. Helen's voice followed her to the door. Oh, and Sophia? The ties were the only thing Martin specifically mentioned by name. Funny how a man who supposedly loved you so much couldn't be bothered to leave you anything of actual value. The door closed behind them with the finality of a coffin lid. Sophia made it to the parking garage before the tears came. She sat in her 15-year-old Honda Civic, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 6 months, and let grief pour out of her in waves while Zara played with the radio buttons, filling the car with static and fragments of songs. Mama sad? Zara's small hand patted Sophia's cheek. Mama's okay, baby. We're going to be okay. But even as she said it, Sophia wondered how. Her father was gone. Her family had disowned her. Her daughter would grow up never knowing her grandfather's love, never understanding that she came from something bigger than this broken-down car and their one-bedroom apartment in the part of town where sirens sang lullabies. That night, after Zara was asleep, Sophia sat on her living room floor surrounded by Martin's ties. She held each one, searching for some message, some sign that he'd really loved her the way she'd always believed. The black silk tie, her favorite, felt different somehow. Heavier. As she examined it more closely, her fingers found a small irregularity in the lining. A hidden pocket, and inside it, folded into a tiny square, was a letter in her father's handwriting. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, then Hellen has done exactly what I feared she would do. But what she doesn't know, what none of them know, is that the Henderson fortune isn't the only inheritance that exists. Your mother, my beautiful Sarah, wasn't just the love of my life. She was also the daughter of Alexander Cromwell, the railroad tycoon who built half the infrastructure on the East Coast. When she died, her father's estate was held in trust, waiting for her next of kin to claim it. That next of kin is you, sweetheart. You are the rightful heir to the Cromwell fortune, approximately $250 million that has been growing for over 2 decades, waiting for you to discover the truth. Sophia's hands were shaking so violently she could barely read the rest. I kept this secret to protect you from Helen's greed and the complications it would bring to our family. But I also kept records, legal documents, everything you'll need to claim what's rightfully yours. They're hidden in the place where we used to watch the stars together. Remember our special place? Under the oak tree where I told you that your mother's love lives forever in the branches above us. Look for the metal box buried 18 inches down, 3 feet from the trunk, on the side where the sunrise touches first. The letter was signed with a shaky, "All my love, Dad," and dated just 2 days before his stroke. Sophia read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. $250 million. Hidden for over 20 years. Her mother's family fortune that no one knew existed. Not Helen, not the step-siblings, not the lawyers. A secret inheritance that could change everything. But more than the money, it was the proof she'd been searching for her entire life. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't an unwanted reminder of her father's past. She was his daughter, the daughter of 2 people who had loved each other deeply, and she came from something bigger than Helen's cruelty had ever allowed her to believe. As dawn broke through her apartment windows, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She was going back to the Henderson estate, not as the rejected stepdaughter begging for scraps, but as a woman on a mission to reclaim her birthright and rewrite the story Helen had tried so desperately to erase. The war for her inheritance was about to begin. And this time, Sophia wasn't fighting alone. She was fighting with the power of a truth that had been buried for 2 decades, waiting for her to finally be brave enough to dig it up. The Henderson estate looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks ago when Sophia had driven up this winding driveway for her father's funeral. The same pristine hedges, the same fountain with its dancing cherubs, the same sense that she was trespassing on a world that had never truly been hers. But this time, she wasn't here as the grieving daughter seeking comfort. She was here as a woman with a shovel in her trunk and a letter that could destroy everything Helen believed she controlled. Sophia parked behind the groundskeeper's shed, out of sight from the main house windows. She'd called in sick to both jobs, something she'd never done before, Not even when Zara had the flu and Sophia had spent 3 days functioning on 2 hours of sleep and pure maternal determination. But this was different. This was about reclaiming a piece of herself that had been stolen before she was old enough to know it existed. The oak tree stood exactly where it had 20 years ago, when 7-year-old Sophia would escape to its massive branches every time Hellen's words cut too deep. Martin had found her there one evening after a particularly brutal dinner where Hellen had corrected Sophia's table manners in front of guests, each criticism designed to highlight how different she was from the rest of the family. "You know what I see when I look up at these branches?" Martin had asked that night, settling beside her in the grass with a gentleness that Sophia had learned to treasure because it was so rare. "I see your mother's love reaching down to protect you. She used to say that oak trees were nature's way of promising that some things last forever." Sophia remembered pressing her small body against his side, breathing in his cologne and feeling safer than she ever did inside the house. "Why doesn't Hellen love me like you do, Daddy?" The pause had stretched long enough for crickets to fill the silence. Sometimes people are afraid of love that looks different from what they expected. But that doesn't make it any less real. Now, at 24, Sophia understood what he'd really been saying. Hellen hadn't just been afraid of Sophia's presence. She'd been threatened by it. By the way Martin's face lit up when Sophia walked into a room. By how he'd saved every drawing, every report card, every small triumph. By the fact that his love for his first daughter was pure in a way his love for Hellen had never been. Sophia pulled the small gardening shovel from her backpack and began digging. 18 inches down, 3 feet from the trunk on the sunrise side. The morning light filtered through the leaves exactly as it had when she was a child, creating the same patterns of shadow and gold that had once made her believe in magic. Her shovel hit metal after 20 minutes of careful digging. The box was smaller than she'd expected, about the size of a laptop computer, wrapped in waterproof plastic and secured with a combination lock. But there was also an envelope taped to the top with, for Sophia's eyes only, written in Martin's careful script. Inside the envelope was another letter, shorter this time. "Sweetheart, the combination is your mother's birthday. 0-7-1-8-9-5. I know you remember it, because you used to ask me to tell you stories about the day she was born every year on that date. Inside this box is everything you'll need to claim your inheritance, but also the truth about why your mother never told her family about me. The Cromwells were powerful people with ugly opinions about who belonged in their world. Your mother chose love over money, and I've spent 20 years hoping you'd never have to make that same choice. But Hellen has forced our hand. I'm sorry you have to fight for what should have been given freely. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. But I'm not sorry you exist, and I never will be. You are the best thing I've ever done. Dad." Sophia's fingers trembled as she entered the combination. July 18, 1995. She'd been 8 when she'd memorized that date, desperate to hold on to every piece of information about the mother she'd lost too young to really remember. The box opened with a soft click. Inside were legal documents that made her heart race. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, and most importantly, a copy of Alexander Cromwell's original will from 1998. The document was thick, official, and absolutely clear in its language. Sarah Cromwell Robinson had been the sole heir to the Cromwell Railroad fortune. Upon her death, all assets were to be held in trust for her children and descendants until claimed by someone who could prove direct lineage. But there was more. Account statements showing the trust's growth over 23 years. Property deeds for railroad holdings across 6 states. Stock certificates in companies Sophia recognized from billionaire headlines. And at the bottom of the box, a manila folder marked Cromwell Family History, Private Investigations, 2018 to 2023. Martin had been researching her mother's family for 5 years. Sophia opened the folder and found herself staring at photographs of massive estates, newspaper clippings about railroad mergers, and most shocking of all, recent photos of an elderly woman with Sarah's eyes standing beside a missing heir poster with Sarah's picture on it. Eleanor Cromwell, Sarah's younger sister. Still alive. Still searching for any surviving family members. According to the private investigator's report, Eleanor had been trying to locate Sarah for over 30 years, never knowing that her sister had died or that a granddaughter existed. The Cromwell family had disowned Sarah when she'd married Martin, a black man they deemed unsuitable. But Eleanor had never stopped hoping for reconciliation. The subject, Eleanor Cromwell, has stated in multiple interviews that she would give anything to find Sarah's children and make amends for the family's past mistakes, the investigator had written. She has been actively searching for any descendants and has expressed regret about the family's racist policies that drove her sister away. Sophia's hands were shaking as she read. She had an aunt who had been searching for her, an aunt who wanted to make amends for the family's sins. But before she could process this revelation fully, she heard footsteps approaching through the grass. "I knew you'd come back." Sophia spun around to find her stepbrother Marcus standing 10 feet away, his expression unreadable. At 19, he had Helen's sharp features but Martin's height, and for a moment he looked so much like their father that Sophia's breath caught. "Marcus." She quickly closed the folder, but there was no hiding the metal box, the scattered documents, the evidence that she'd been digging up family secrets. "I was just looking for something Dad left you." Marcus stepped closer, his voice careful and controlled. "Yeah, I figured. You always were the smart one." This wasn't the Marcus she remembered. Growing up, he'd been Helen's golden boy, the one who'd learned early that the easiest way to earn their stepmother's approval was to echo her cruelty toward Sophia. He'd called her names, excluded her from family activities, made it clear that she was tolerated but never truly welcomed. But something in his voice now was different. Softer. "Marcus, I can explain. You don't have to." He sat down in the grass beside her, and for the first time in their lives, he looked at her like she was his sister instead of his rival for their father's attention. "Mom's been lying to us about a lot of things. I've been figuring that out since Dad died." Sophia's guard went up immediately. This felt like a trap. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I found some of Dad's papers in his study, before Mom could destroy them. Different papers than what you've got, but they painted a pretty clear picture." Marcus pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "Like this email he sent to his lawyer 3 days before his stroke, asking about changing his will back to include you. He never wanted you cut out, Sophia. Mom forged his signature on that final will." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. "She what?" "Dad was planning to restore your inheritance and tell you about your mother's family. He'd hired lawyers, investigators, the whole thing. But then he had the stroke, and Mom moved fast. She had access to all his accounts, his documents, his passwords. She created a fake will, backdated it, and destroyed the evidence of what Dad really wanted." Marcus handed her the email printout. It was addressed to the estate attorney, marked urgent, and the subject line read, "Immediate revision needed. Must restore Sophia's full inheritance and disclose Cromwell trust information." "Why are you telling me this?" Sophia whispered. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. "Because I've spent my whole life being Mom's puppet, and I'm tired of it. Because Dad loved you in a way he never loved us, and you deserved better. And because..." He looked up at her with eyes that held 20 years of regret. "Because I was a horrible brother to you, and I can't live with that anymore." For the first time since Martin's funeral, Sophia felt like she might not be completely alone in this fight. "Marcus, this is dangerous. If your mother finds out you're helping me..." "She won't." His voice was firm. "I'm good at keeping secrets. I've been keeping them my whole life." But even as relief flooded through her, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that trusting Marcus was dangerous. He was still Helen's son. He'd still spent 20 years learning cruelty at her knee. And if this was some elaborate setup to get Sophia to reveal what she'd found. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Mom's been meeting with some lawyer from New York. Corporate guy, expensive suit, talks about asset acquisition and claim prevention. I think she knows more about your mother's family than she's letting on." Ice water flooded Sophia's veins. "What kind of claim prevention?" "The kind where they make sure certain people never find out what they're entitled to inherit." In that moment, Sophia realized that her fight wasn't just about claiming her inheritance. Hellen wasn't just trying to keep her out of the Henderson fortune. She was actively working to make sure Sophia never discovered the Cromwell legacy, which meant Hellen had known the truth all along. The betrayal was complete, devastating, and 20 years in the making. Hellen hadn't just stolen Sophia's inheritance after Martin's death. She'd been systematically working to erase Sophia's true legacy for decades, keeping her trapped in poverty while sitting on information that could have changed everything. But it also meant that Hellen was afraid. And people who were afraid made mistakes. Sophia looked at Marcus, this stepbrother who might be offering genuine alliance or elaborate betrayal, and made a decision that would determine everything that came next. "If you really want to help me," she said quietly, "then I need you to find out everything you can about that New York lawyer. Names, meeting times, what they're planning. Because I'm not just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I'm fighting to expose 20 years of lies." Marcus nodded slowly. "And if I do this, if I help you take down Mom, you have to promise me something." "What?" "When you win, and you're going to win, because Dad would haunt this place if you didn't. You remember that some of us were just kids who didn't know any better. Some of us want the chance to be better." Sophia looked at her stepbrother, this boy who'd been raised to hate her, but was now offering to betray the only mother he'd ever known, and felt the first stirring of something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope for a family that wasn't built on lies and conditional love. But in the back of her mind, a voice whispered the lesson she'd learned too many times before. In the Henderson family, hope always came with a price. Sophia spent 3 sleepless days researching Eleanor Cromwell, while Zara was at daycare, and she pretended to be sick from work. The private investigator's files painted the picture of a woman consumed by regret. Eleanor had spent decades trying to undo the damage caused by her family's racism and pride. She'd established scholarship funds for minority students, donated millions to civil rights organizations, and hired investigators across the country searching for any trace of Sarah's family. But most importantly, Eleanor had legal standing to help Sophia claim the inheritance. As Sarah's sister and the current trustee of their father's estate, she had the power to authorize the transfer of funds to Sarah's daughter without the lengthy court battles that would drain Sophia's non-existent resources. On Thursday morning, while Marcus was supposed to be at college classes and Hellen was at her weekly spa appointment, Sophia made the phone call that would change everything. "Cromwell Family Trust, this is Janet speaking." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. I need to speak with Eleanor Cromwell. It's about Sarah Cromwell Robinson." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Sophia wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, a shaky voice whispered, "Sarah? Did you say Sarah Robinson? This is Sophia Robinson. I believe Sarah was my mother." What happened next was unlike anything Sophia had ever experienced. Eleanor Cromwell, this 73-year-old woman she'd never met, began sobbing with such raw emotion that Sophia found herself crying too, standing in her tiny kitchen while a stranger grieved for the sister she'd lost and the niece she'd never known existed. "Oh my God," Eleanor kept repeating. "Oh my God, Sarah's baby. You're Sarah's baby. I've been looking for you for 30 years. The conversation that followed was a revelation. Eleanor confirmed everything in Martin's documents and more. She explained how the family had disowned Sarah for marrying Martin, how their father had regretted it until his dying day, and how Eleanor had been fighting the family trustees for decades to find Sarah's children and make amends. "I need you to come to Boston," Eleanor said through her tears. "Immediately. I need to see you, hold you, and we need to make this transfer official before anyone tries to stop us." "Who would stop us?" Another long pause. "Sophia, honey, there are people who benefit from that money staying unclaimed. Trust administrators, law firms, distant relatives who inherit if direct descendants are never found. $250 million creates a lot of enemies when you try to give it to its rightful owner." That phrase, rightful owner, sent electricity through Sophia's veins. For the first time in her life, she was the rightful owner of something valuable. Not the charity case, not the burden, not the mistake that needed to be managed. The rightful owner. "I'll catch a flight tonight," Sophia said, surprising herself with her decisiveness. "I'll have my driver pick you up at Logan. And Sophia, bring any documentation you have, but more importantly, bring yourself and that little girl of yours. I want to meet my great niece." After they hung up, Sophia called Marcus. "I need you to watch Zara tomorrow while I go to Boston." "Boston? Sophia, that's moving pretty fast. Maybe you should. Your mother has been stealing from me for 20 years, Marcus. I'm done moving slow." She heard him sigh. "Okay, but be careful. And whatever you do, Don't let Mom know where you're going. But Hellen already knew. That evening, as Sophia was packing their few good clothes into a borrowed suitcase, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Sophia. This is Hellen. The voice was different from the cold fury Sophia remembered from the lawyer's office. This was controlled, almost gentle, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. I think we need to have a conversation before you make any decisions you'll regret. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, but I think you do. Especially when it concerns your daughter's future. Ice water flooded Sophia's veins. What did you just say? Meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour. The playground where you used to bring Zara. Come alone, and bring your little box of documents. And if I don't? Hellen's laugh was soft and deadly. Then I make some phone calls about an unfit mother who's been neglecting her child to chase fantasies about imaginary inheritances. Social services can be so thorough in their investigations. The line went dead. Sophia stood frozen in her bedroom, understanding with crystal clarity that the game had just changed completely. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about proving she belonged in the Henderson family. Hellen was threatening Zara, the one thing in Sophia's life that mattered more than justice, more than inheritance, more than her own pain. But she also understood something else. Hellen was scared enough to play her nuclear card, which meant Sophia was closer to the truth than she'd realized. An hour later, Sophia sat on a park bench watching Hellen approach across the darkened playground. Even in the dim streetlight, Hellen moved with the predatory grace of someone who'd spent decades getting what she wanted through calculated intimidation. You look tired, Sophia. Hellen settled beside her with the casual familiarity of an old friend. Motherhood is exhausting, isn't it? Especially single motherhood on minimum wage. What do you want? I want to make you an offer. Hellen pulled out a manila envelope. $1 million. Cash. Untraceable. Enough to buy a house, pay for Zara's college, give your daughter the life you never had. Sophia stared at the envelope without touching it. In exchange for what? For walking away from this foolish treasure hunt and never mentioning the Cromwell name again. The offer was staggering. More money than Sophia had ever dreamed of having. Enough to transform Zara's entire future. Enough to prove that she could provide for her daughter without charity or pity or inherited wealth. But it was also proof that the inheritance was real, significant, and that Hellen was terrified of losing control. Why? Sophia asked quietly. Why go this far to keep me away from money that was never yours? For the first time, Hellen's perfect mask slipped. Her voice carried a tremor of something that might have been vulnerability. Because I know what happens when outsiders claim what established families think belongs to them. I know because I was an outsider once too. The revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow. What? Hellen's laugh was bitter. You think I was born into wealth? You think the Henderson family welcomed me with open arms when Martin brought home a waitress from the wrong side of town? She turned to look at Sophia directly, and in her eyes was a pain that looked almost familiar. I fought for 20 years to earn my place in that family. 20 years of being perfect, being grateful, being exactly what they needed me to be. And it worked, until your mother showed up and reminded everyone that Martin's heart belonged somewhere else. The moral complexity Sophia hadn't expected crashed over her in waves. Hellen wasn't just the evil stepmother from a fairy tale. She was a woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty, earned her place in a world that hadn't wanted her, and then spent decades defending it from any threat, including an innocent child who reminded everyone of her husband's greatest love. Sarah was everything I couldn't be, Hellen continued. Beautiful, educated, sophisticated. From a family with real money, real connections. When she died and Martin brought you home, I saw my future in your face. I saw myself being replaced by someone who belonged in a way I never would. So you made sure I never knew I belonged anywhere. I made sure my children inherited what I built for them. Hellen's voice hardened again. And I'm making the same offer to you now that someone should have made to me 30 years ago. Take the money. Walk away. Build your own life instead of trying to claim someone else's. Sophia looked at the envelope, at this woman who'd spent 20 years tormenting her out of her own deep fear of abandonment, and felt something she'd never expected, pity. But she also felt something stronger, fury. The difference between us, Sophia said slowly, is that I'm not trying to take anything away from your children. I'm not trying to replace anyone or prove I'm better than anyone. I'm just trying to claim what was always mine." She stood up, leaving the envelope on the bench between them. "And I'm not walking away. Not from my inheritance, not from my aunt who's been looking for me, and especially not from the truth about who my mother really was." "Then you've made your choice." Helen's voice was ice again. "And I've made mine." As Sophia walked away, her phone buzzed with a text message that made her blood turn to liquid nitrogen. "Ms. Robinson, this is Child Protective Services. We've received reports of potential neglect and need to schedule an immediate welfare check for your daughter. Please contact us within 24 hours to arrange a home visit." Sophia spun around, but Hellen was already gone, leaving only the envelope of blood money on the park bench like evidence of a deal with the devil that Sophia had refused to make. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. Hellen wasn't just trying to steal her inheritance, she was trying to steal her daughter. And Sophia had less than 24 hours to figure out how to fight a war on multiple fronts against an enemy who'd spent decades perfecting the art of destroying lives. But as terror and fury warred in her chest, Sophia realized something else. She wasn't the same broken girl who'd begged for love at the Henderson family table. She was a mother now, a fighter, and she had allies Marcus, Eleanor, and most importantly, the truth. The point of no return wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. Sophia pulled out her phone and called Eleanor Cromwell. "I need to move up our timeline. Can you have your lawyers file the inheritance claim tonight?" "Sophia, what's wrong?" "Someone's trying to take my daughter away from me, and I need that inheritance to fight back." Eleanor's voice turned steel-hard with protective fury. "Consider it done. And Sophia? Pack light and bring Zara. You're both staying with me until this is over. No one threatens my great niece on my watch." As Sophia ran toward her car, one thought burned crystal clear in her mind. Hellen had just awakened something in her that 20 years of cruelty had never been able to touch. Not the desperate child seeking approval, but the fierce mother willing to burn down anyone who threatened her daughter's future. The war for her inheritance had become a war for her daughter's life. And Sophia Robinson was about to show the Henderson family what happened when you cornered a mother with nothing left to lose. The Cromwell estate in Beacon Hill looked like something from a period film. Red brick townhouse with gas lanterns, marble steps worn smooth by generations of wealth, windows that gleamed like jewels against the Boston skyline. Sophia stood on the sidewalk holding Zara's hand, both of them clutching their bargain store suitcases, feeling like refugees seeking asylum in a foreign country. "Mama, is this where the princess lives?" Zara whispered, her 3-year-old eyes wide with wonder. Before Sophia could answer, the massive front door opened and Eleanor Cromwell stepped into view. She was smaller than Sophia had imagined, barely 5'4", with silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon and Sarah's eyes. Those same warm brown eyes that Sophia saw in the mirror every morning. "Oh my God," Eleanor breathed, her hand flying to her heart. "Sarah, you look just like Sarah." The next few minutes dissolved into tears and embraces as Eleanor gathered both Sophia and Zara into her arms with the desperate affection of someone who'd been grieving lost family for 30 years. She smelled like expensive perfume and old books, and when she held Sophia, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. Come in," Eleanor urged, leading them into a foyer that could have fit Sophia's entire apartment. "Charles, my attorney, is already here with the paperwork. We're going to make this official before anyone can interfere." But as they settled in Eleanor's library, a room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books and family portraits, Sophia's phone rang. The CPS number she'd been dreading. "Ms. Robinson? This is Janet Martinez from Child Protective Services. We need to conduct that welfare check today. Where is your daughter currently?" Sophia's mouth went dry. We're visiting family in Boston." "I see. Well, we'll need to interview her here in Massachusetts then. Can you provide the address where you're staying?" Eleanor was watching Sophia's face, reading the panic there with the sharp intelligence of someone who'd spent decades navigating complex legal waters. She held out her hand for the phone. "This is Eleanor Cromwell," she said with the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. "Sophia and her daughter are my guests. If you need to conduct any interviews, you'll do so through my family attorney, who will ensure proper procedures are followed and that this family's rights are protected. There was a pause on the other end. Ma'am, I'm not sure you understand. This is a child welfare investigation. Based on anonymous reports, I assume? Reports made by someone with a vested interest in discrediting Ms. Robinson. Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. Charles, would you please speak with this woman? Charles Whitman was everything Sophia had expected from a Boston family lawyer. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of quiet power that came from decades of protecting old money. He took the phone with the weary efficiency of someone who'd handled this type of intimidation many times before. Ms. Martinez, this is Charles Whitman of Whitman, Sterling and Associates. My client will be happy to cooperate with any legitimate investigation, but all communication will go through my office. We'll need copies of the complaint, the name of the reporting party, and a formal request for any interviews. His pause was loaded with unspoken threats. I trust you understand that false reports filed in bad faith are prosecutable offenses in Massachusetts? After he hung up, Eleanor turned to Sophia with fierce protectiveness in her eyes. Now, tell me everything. Who's trying to take Zara away from you? As Sophia explained Helen's threat, she watched Eleanor's expression transform from concern to cold fury. It was like seeing a glimpse of the steel that had built railroad empires. That woman has no idea who she's dealing with, Eleanor said quietly. But we need to move fast. Charles, how quickly can we file the inheritance claim? I've already started the paperwork, but there's a complication. Charles pulled out a thick folder. Someone else filed a competing claim yesterday. They're arguing that Sarah Cromwell died intestate, without valid heirs, and that the estate should default to the state trust administrators who've been managing it. Sophia felt the floor drop out from under her. Who filed the claim? A law firm called Brennan, Morrison and Associates. They represent. Charles checked his notes. A Hellen Henderson, who claims to have documentation proving that Sarah Cromwell's daughter died in infancy, making any current claims fraudulent. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly calculated, that Sophia almost admired its evil genius. Helen wasn't just trying to steal the inheritance. She was trying to erase Sophia's existence entirely, claiming she died as a baby and therefore never had any legal standing to inherit anything. But that's insane, Sophia said. I'm sitting right here. I have birth certificates, DNA. Which is exactly why this won't hold up in court, Eleanor interrupted. But it will delay the transfer for months, maybe years. And during that time, she looked meaningfully at Sophia's phone, which had been buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from CPS. During that time, they'll destroy my life piece by piece, Sophia finished. Not if we destroy them first. Eleanor's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. Charles, I want you to file a counterclaim alleging fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. And I want a private investigator to dig into every financial transaction the Henderson family has made in the last 5 years. But even as relief flooded through Sophia, her phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. Sophia, you need to get back here. Now. I can't. CPS is. Mom's having Dad's body exhumed. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She's what? She claims there were irregularities with his death, that maybe he was poisoned or something. It's complete bullshit, but it's enough to get a court order. She's trying to prove that someone killed him to access his will early. The implication was crystal clear. Helen was setting up a narrative where Sophia had murdered Martin to claim her inheritance. It was insane, impossible to prove, but it would generate headlines, investigation, and enough scandal to discredit Sophia in any legal proceeding. Marcus, you have to stop her. I'm trying, but she's cut me off from everything. Changed all the passwords, frozen my accounts. And there's something else. His voice dropped to a whisper. I think she's been recording our conversations. All of them. She knows I've been helping you. The trap was closing from every direction. Legal challenges to the inheritance, CPS investigation threatening Zara, now potential murder accusations, and the loss of her only ally in the Henderson family. Helen was systematically destroying every avenue of escape. But as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Sophia noticed something. Eleanor and Charles were exchanging a look loaded with meaning, the kind of silent communication that came from years of partnership. What aren't you telling me? Sophia demanded. Eleanor sighed. Charles, show her the other file. Charles pulled out another folder, this one marked Henderson Family Financial Records, Confidential. When I started researching your case, I did some digging into the Henderson family finances. Sophia, your stepmother has been embezzling from your father's business for years. The documents he spread across the table told a story of systematic theft. Fake invoices, diverted payments, shell companies that existed only to funnel Henderson construction profits into Hellen's personal accounts. Over the past 5 years, she'd stolen nearly $2 million. But more importantly, Charles continued, she's been using that stolen money to pay the law firm that's now challenging your inheritance claim. Brennan, Morrison and Associates has been on Hellen's payroll long before your father died. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Hellen hadn't just been planning to steal Sophia's Henderson inheritance. She'd been preparing to block the Cromwell inheritance too, using money she'd embezzled from Martin's business to fund a legal challenge designed to keep Sophia trapped in poverty forever. We can destroy her, Eleanor said quietly. Financial fraud, forgery, conspiracy, child endangerment. She'll go to prison. But even as victory seemed within reach, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message that changed everything. Sophia, this is Marcus. Don't trust Eleanor Cromwell. Meet me at the old oak tree tonight. Come alone. There are things about your mother's family you need to know before it's too late. Sophia stared at the message, ice water flooding her veins. Marcus had never called Eleanor by name before. How did he even know she was with Eleanor? Unless, is something wrong, dear? Eleanor asked, her voice gentle with concern. Sophia looked at this woman who'd welcomed her with open arms, who'd promised to help her claim her inheritance, who'd offered protection and family and everything she'd been searching for her entire life. Eleanor's eyes were kind, her concern seemed genuine, and every instinct told Sophia that she'd finally found sanctuary. But Marcus's warning echoed in her mind, and she thought about the private investigator's files, about the legal documents that had been prepared with suspicious efficiency, about how perfectly everything had fallen into place once Eleanor entered the picture. I'm fine, Sophia lied, clutching her phone tighter. Just tired. As Eleanor and Charles continued planning their legal strategy, Sophia made a decision that terrified her. Tonight, she would sneak out and meet Marcus at the oak tree, leaving behind the warm sanctuary of the Cromwell estate to venture back into the darkness of her past. Because the one thing Hellen had taught her over 20 years of cruelty was this. When something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. And right now, Eleanor Cromwell's perfect, generous, loving rescue felt exactly like the kind of beautiful lie that destroyed people who were desperate enough to believe in it. But as she watched Zara playing contentedly in this mansion filled with books and warmth and acceptance, Sophia realized the most terrifying truth of all. She wanted to believe in Eleanor's love so desperately that she might ignore every warning sign, every red flag, every instinct that had kept her alive through 20 years of Henderson family manipulation. The pressure was building from every direction. Legal battles, custody threats, family betrayals, and now the growing suspicion that her rescue might be just another elaborate trap. And somewhere in the middle of it all was the truth about her mother, her inheritance, and the forces that had been shaping her life since before she was born. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between the safety of Eleanor's protection and the dangerous uncertainty of Marcus's warnings. Between the family that claimed to love her and the family that had always shown its true face. Between the inheritance that could free her and the possibility that claiming it might destroy everything she actually cared about. The war for her legacy was about to become a battle for her soul. The oak tree looked different at midnight. Menacing shadows stretched across the ground where Sophia and Martin had once shared their happiest moments, and the autumn wind carried sounds that made her jump at every branch creak. She'd left Zara safely asleep at Eleanor's house, telling Charles she needed fresh air to clear her head. Now she waited in the darkness, second-guessing every decision that had brought her to this moment. Marcus emerged from the shadows like a ghost, his face pale in the moonlight. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stepped Eleanor Cromwell, her elegant composure intact even in the middle of a graveyard meeting. "Hello, Sophia," Eleanor said gently. "I'm sorry we had to do it this way." Ice water flooded Sophia's veins. "You two know each other." "We've been working together for quite some time," Marcus said, his voice carrying none of the warmth it had held during their previous conversations. Though working together might not be the right phrase. Eleanor stepped forward, her grandmother facade dropping away like a mask. Sophia, dear, I need you to understand that everything I told you about the inheritance was true. The Cromwell Trust exists, you are Sarah's daughter, and you are legally entitled to claim it. But, Sophia's hand moved instinctively toward her phone. But the inheritance isn't $250 million, Marcus continued. It's $12 billion. The number hit Sophia like a physical blow. 12 billion. Not millions. Billions. Your grandfather was more than a railroad tycoon, Eleanor explained with clinical precision. He was one of the primary investors in early computer technology, pharmaceutical patents, oil drilling rights. The trust has been compounding for 70 years, not 23. Your mother was set to inherit one of the largest privately held fortunes in America. Sophia's mind reeled. Why are you telling me this? Eleanor and Marcus exchanged a look loaded with meaning. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice carried a sadness that felt genuine despite everything. Because claiming that inheritance comes with conditions your father never told you about. Conditions that will destroy your life. What conditions? Marcus pulled out a thick legal document. The Cromwell Family Trust includes a morality clause written in 1952. Any heir who has children outside of marriage automatically forfeits the entire inheritance to the state. The words fell like bombs in the darkness. Sophia was unmarried. Zara was born outside of marriage. By 1952 standards, by the standards written into her grandfather's will, she was morally unfit to inherit. But that's... Sophia's voice cracked. That can't be legal anymore. Actually it is, Eleanor said quietly. Private family trusts operate under different rules than public inheritance law. The morality clause stands. If you claim the inheritance, you'll be investigated, judged, and ultimately denied. But worse than that. She paused, as if the next words physically hurt to speak. The investigation will expose Zara's paternity publicly. Every detail of your personal life will become part of the legal record. Your daughter will grow up knowing the world judged her mother unworthy of her own birthright. Sophia felt like she was drowning. So what are you saying? Marcus stepped closer, his voice gentle in a way that made her chest ache. We're saying there's another option. Eleanor has the legal authority to transfer the inheritance to Zara directly, skipping the morality clause entirely. She could inherit when she turns 18, with you as the trustee managing the funds until then. In the meantime, Eleanor continued, we could arrange a settlement. $50 million, paid immediately, with no legal challenges and no public investigation. Enough to secure both your futures without subjecting your family to decades of scrutiny. It was a generous offer. A life-changing offer. But something about the way they were presenting it, here, in the darkness, away from lawyers and witnesses, felt wrong. Why not tell me this at your house? Sophia asked. Why the secrecy? Marcus and Eleanor exchanged another look, and this time Sophia caught something in their expressions that made her blood turn to ice. Because, Marcus said slowly, there's something else you need to know about the morality clause. Something about why it was written. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Sophia, your grandfather didn't write that clause to punish unwed mothers. He wrote it specifically to punish your mother for falling in love with a black man. The revelation hit like a sledgehammer. What? The clause was added to the will in 1969, right after Sarah brought Martin home to meet the family, Eleanor continued, tears streaming down her face. Alexander Cromwell was so enraged by his daughter's choice that he rewrote his entire will to ensure she could never inherit if she had children with that man. The morality clause was just legal language to hide his racism. Sophia's legs gave out. She sank to the ground beside the oak tree, understanding flooding through her with devastating clarity. So even if the inheritance laws changed, even if unwed mothers could inherit now, the clause specifically targets children born from interracial relationships, Marcus finished. Zara would be disqualified no matter what. Not because of your marital status, but because of her race. The cruelty was breathtaking. Even in death, even 70 years later, her great-grandfather's racism was reaching out to punish her daughter for the crime of existing. But through the devastation, one thought surfaced. How do you know all this, Marcus? He was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because Eleanor is my grandmother too. The world tilted on its axis. What? Sarah and my mother, Helen, are sisters, Marcus said, the words coming out in a rush now. Helen Cromwell became Helen Henderson when she married your father. Eleanor is her older sister. Sophia stared at him, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. Helen is Sarah's sister? Half-sister, Eleanor corrected quietly. Different mothers, same racist father. Helen ran away when she was 16, changed her last name, and spent her life trying to escape the Cromwell reputation. When she met Martin, she saw her chance at a normal life. Until Sarah showed up, Marcus continued. Until Martin fell in love with the sister Mom had been running from her entire life. The sister who represented everything Mom had tried to leave behind. The wealth, the family name, the suffocating expectations. The scope of the deception was staggering. Helen wasn't just a jealous stepmother. She was Sarah's estranged sister, fighting a decades-old family war. Eleanor wasn't just a loving aunt. She was Helen's sister too, caught in the middle of an inheritance battle that had been brewing for 50 years. You've all been lying to me, Sophia whispered. All of you. We've been trying to protect you, Eleanor said desperately. Don't you see? If you claim the inheritance publicly, it will destroy you. The media attention, the legal challenges, the inevitable ruling that you're unfit because of a racist clause from 1952, it will break you. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand reaching for hers. But if we do this quietly, if you take the 50 million and walk away, you and Zara can have everything you've ever wanted without the nightmare of fighting our grandfather's ghost. His touch sent electricity through her, and suddenly Sophia understood the final piece of the puzzle. Marcus wasn't just offering her a legal solution, he was offering himself. The way he looked at her, the gentle urgency in his voice, the careful way he'd positioned himself as her ally from the beginning. You're in love with me, she said. His silence was answer enough. How long? Since we were kids, he admitted. Since I watched you try so hard to belong in a family that was never going to accept you. Since I realized that hurting you was the only way to survive in that house, and hating myself for it every single day. The betrayal was complete. Not just the legal manipulation, not just the family secrets, but the emotional manipulation of a man who'd spent 20 years learning to hurt the woman he loved, and was now offering her salvation with the same hands that had once pushed her away. Sophia stood on shaking legs, understanding that every relationship in her life had been built on lies. Eleanor's love, Marcus's alliance, even Helen's hatred, all of it rooted in a family war she'd been born into without her knowledge or consent. I need to get back to my daughter, she said quietly. Sophia, please, Eleanor called after her. Think about what we've offered you. $50 million and a life free from this family's poison. Sophia turned back one last time. I've been thinking about it my whole life. And I'm done letting other people decide what I'm worth. As she walked away, leaving behind the two people who'd just shattered her world with their twisted version of salvation, Sophia realized that the real inheritance wasn't money at all. It was the choice to stop being a victim of other people's wars. Sophia returned to Eleanor's estate to find police cars in the driveway and her worst nightmare unfolding in the pristine marble foyer. 2 CPS workers flanked a Boston police officer, while Eleanor stood with her arms crossed, radiating the cold fury of someone accustomed to getting her way. Ms. Robinson, the lead CPS worker said as Sophia rushed through the door, we have a court order for emergency custody pending investigation. Investigation of what? Sophia's voice cracked as she spotted Zara sitting on Eleanor's velvet couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit and looking terrified by all the strange adults. Allegations of child endangerment, specifically bringing a minor across state lines to avoid a welfare investigation. The officer held up an official document. Massachusetts Family Court has granted temporary custody to. To me, Eleanor interrupted smoothly. As a qualified family member with appropriate resources. The trap had been perfectly laid. By bringing Zara to Boston, Sophia had inadvertently given Eleanor legal standing to claim emergency custody. As Sarah's sister and Zara's great-aunt, Eleanor had more resources, stability, and legal connections than a single mother working 2 minimum-wage jobs. This is insane, Sophia whispered, moving toward Zara. I brought her here to keep her safe. From what? The CPS worker asked pointedly. Your file shows missed work, suspicious financial investigations, and now fleeing state jurisdiction with a minor child. Every choice Sophia had made to protect Zara was being twisted into evidence of unfitness. Fighting for her inheritance looked like greed. Seeking Eleanor's help looked like abandonment. Even her love for her daughter was being used as proof she couldn't provide stability. Mama! Zara's small voice cut through the legal jargon like a knife. Why are you crying? Sophia knelt beside the couch, her hands shaking as she touched her daughter's face. Mama's just scared, baby. But you're going to stay with Eleanor for a little while, okay? I want to go home with you. The words shattered what remained of Sophia's composure. She pulled Zara into her arms, breathing in her daughter's scent, memorizing the weight of her small body, knowing this might be the last time she held her child for weeks or months or, if Helen's legal team was effective enough, forever. I know, sweetheart. I want that too. Ms. Robinson, the CPS worker's voice was gentler now, recognizing genuine maternal love when she saw it. You can have supervised visits while we sort this out. But right now, your daughter needs stability that you can't provide. After they left, after the paperwork was signed and visiting schedules arranged, and Sophia walked out of the mansion with nothing but her phone and broken heart, she sat in her rental car and called the one person who might understand what she was feeling. Helen. Sophia. Helen's voice carried satisfaction mixed with something that might have been genuine sympathy. I heard about the custody situation. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're right. I'm not. Helen's honesty was almost refreshing after hours of legal manipulation disguised as concern. But I am sorry that you forced it to come to this. Sophia closed her eyes, too exhausted for anger. What do you want? I want to make you the same offer I made 3 days ago. $1 million. Sign papers renouncing any claim to the Cromwell inheritance. Agree to supervised visits with Zara until she's 18 and walk away. And if I don't, then Eleanor will raise your daughter as a Cromwell. Zara will grow up with the best education money can buy, summer homes in the Hamptons, connections to the most powerful families in America. She'll want for nothing. The cruelty was perfect in its logic. Accepting Helen's offer meant abandoning her daughter and her birthright, living the rest of her life knowing she'd chosen money over motherhood. But fighting meant watching Zara grow up thinking her mother had abandoned her, raised by the same family dynamics that had poisoned 3 generations of women. There's a third option, Helen continued, her voice almost gentle. You could come home, back to the Henderson house, back to being part of the family. What family? Sophia laughed bitterly. You cut me out of your will, remember? Wills can be changed, especially when new information comes to light about previous irregularities. The offer hung in the air like poison wrapped in silk. Helen was offering her everything she'd wanted as a child: acceptance, belonging, security. All she had to do was give up everything she'd discovered as an adult. Her mother's true identity, her daughter's inheritance, her own sense of worth. What would I have to do? Marry Marcus. The words hit like a physical blow. What? He's in love with you. Has been for years. A marriage would solve everyone's problems. You'd be legally part of the Henderson family. Zara would have a father and financial security, and Marcus would finally get what he's always wanted. Sophia thought about Marcus's gentle touch by the oak tree, the way he'd looked at her with decades of longing and regret. He was handsome, kind when he wasn't performing for his mother, and he genuinely cared about Zara. Most women would consider him a good catch. But marrying Marcus would mean accepting that love was transactional, that security came with the price of authenticity, that she would spend the rest of her life wondering if her husband's affection was real or just another form of family manipulation. And the inheritance goes unclaimed. Eleanor keeps managing the trust. Marcus inherits the Henderson construction business, and everyone gets what they need without destroying each other. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sophia, this is Charles Whitman. Eleanor has filed papers seeking permanent custody of Zara. The hearing is tomorrow morning. If you're planning to fight this, you need legal representation immediately. The timeline was accelerating beyond anything Sophia could handle alone. She had no money for lawyers, no allies who weren't compromised by their own agendas, and less than 18 hours to figure out how to keep her daughter from disappearing into the Cromwell family machine. "I need time to think," she told Hellen. "You have until tomorrow's custody hearing. After that, the offer is off the table." Sophia hung up and stared at the mansion where her daughter was sleeping in a bedroom larger than their entire apartment, surrounded by toys she could never afford and a future she could never provide. Through the windows, she could see Eleanor reading Zara a bedtime story, both of them bathed in warm lamplight that looked like something from a fairy tale. For one moment, one terrible, seductive moment, Sophia let herself imagine what it would be like to stop fighting. To walk into that mansion as Marcus's wife, to watch Zara grow up with every advantage, to finally belong somewhere without having to prove she deserved it. But then she thought about her mother, Sarah, who had chosen love over money and family acceptance, who had walked away from this same fortune to build a life based on authentic connection rather than inherited wealth. And she thought about Zara, who would grow up thinking that a woman's worth was determined by the family she married into rather than the strength she built within herself. Sophia started the car and drove toward the only place she could think to go, the cemetery where her mother was buried, where she could ask Sarah's ghost what love was worth when everyone you trusted was willing to betray it. Tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom with nothing but the truth and fight for her daughter against people who could afford to make truth irrelevant. But tonight, she would grieve for the family she'd lost, the inheritance that came with too high a price, and the man she might have loved if he hadn't been raised by a woman who taught him that love was just another form of control. The darkest hour had arrived, and Sophia Robinson was about to discover whether she was her mother's daughter in ways that mattered more than money. The Suffolk County family court smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Sophia sat alone at the respondent's table, wearing her one good dress and carrying a folder of documents that felt pathetically thin compared to the legal army assembled across the aisle. Eleanor's team included 3 attorneys, a child psychologist, and enough paperwork to build a fort. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Chun. As the judge entered, Sophia caught sight of familiar faces in the gallery. Marcus sat behind Eleanor's legal team, his eyes avoiding hers. Hellen perched in the back row like a vulture waiting for roadkill. And in the very last seat, barely visible, Charles Whitman, Eleanor's attorney, though he was supposed to be representing Sophia's interests. The betrayal was complete. "Your Honor," Eleanor's lead attorney began, "we're here because Ms. Robinson has demonstrated a pattern of instability that endangers this child's welfare. She's involved in complex financial litigation, has fled state jurisdiction, and lacks the resources to provide appropriate care." Judge Chun reviewed the files with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many families destroy themselves over money and pride. "Ms. Robinson, are you represented by counsel?" Sophia stood on trembling legs. "No, Your Honor. I can't afford an attorney. The court can appoint." "That won't be necessary." The voice came from the back of the courtroom, confident and familiar. Sophia spun around to see a woman in an expensive suit striding down the aisle. Someone she'd never seen before, but who carried herself with unmistakable authority. "I'm Rebecca Stone from Stone and Associates. I represent Ms. Robinson and her daughter's interests." Eleanor's attorneys exchanged alarmed looks. Rebecca Stone was clearly not someone they'd expected or wanted in this courtroom. "Your Honor," Rebecca continued, pulling out her own thick folder, "before we proceed with this custody matter, there are several criminal issues the court needs to address. My client has discovered evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment that goes to the heart of this case." "What kind of evidence?" Judge Chun asked sharply. Rebecca turned to face Eleanor directly. "Evidence that Mrs. Cromwell has been systematically manipulating legal proceedings to gain custody of a child for the sole purpose of controlling a $12 billion inheritance." The courtroom erupted. Eleanor's face went white. Hellen stood up in the back, her mouth opening in shock. Only Marcus remained perfectly still, and suddenly Sophia understood. "Your Honor," Rebecca continued over the chaos, "Mrs. Cromwell has been working with the child's step-grandmother, Hellen Henderson, to manufacture this custody crisis. They've filed false CPS reports, manipulated legal timelines, and conspired to separate this mother from her child specifically because they know the child will inherit billions when she turns 18. Judge Chun banged her gavel. That's a serious accusation, counselor. Do you have proof? I have recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from a witness who was forced to participate in this conspiracy. Rebecca gestured toward Marcus. Mr. Henderson has provided evidence that his mother and Mrs. Cromwell have been planning this for months. Sophia stared at Marcus, understanding flooding through her. He hadn't betrayed her. He'd been gathering evidence. The late-night meetings, the careful questions, the intimate conversation by the oak tree. He'd been building a case while pretending to be part of the conspiracy. Is this true, Mr. Henderson? Judge Chen asked. Marcus stood slowly, his face pale but determined. Yes, Your Honor. My mother and Eleanor Cromwell have been working together since before my stepfather died. They've been planning to gain custody of Zara so they can control her inheritance until she's 18, and then manipulate her into signing it over to the family. You lying little. Hellen started toward Marcus, but the bailiff stepped between them. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Mrs. Cromwell has been operating under false pretenses. She's not actually Sarah Cromwell's sister. She's Sarah's cousin, with no legal standing for emergency custody. She used forged documents to convince CPS that she was the child's great-aunt. Eleanor's lead attorney was whispering furiously in her ear, but Eleanor herself seemed to have aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes. The elegant facade was cracking, revealing something desperate and calculating underneath. Your Honor, Eleanor's attorney said weakly, these are very serious allegations that require. What they require, Judge Chen interrupted, is immediate investigation. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Cromwell to holding while we sort this out. She turned to Sophia with something that looked like sympathy. Ms. Robinson, I'm returning temporary custody of your daughter to you immediately. However, given the complex nature of this situation, CPS will conduct follow-up visits to ensure the child's safety. As Eleanor was led away in handcuffs, her composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand, she shouted at Sophia. That money will destroy you. It destroyed Sarah. It destroyed our whole family. I was trying to protect her. The courtroom fell silent as Eleanor's words echoed off the walls. In that moment, Sophia saw the truth underneath all the manipulation. Eleanor genuinely believed she was saving Zara from the curse of inherited wealth. The woman who'd welcomed them with open arms, who'd offered love and luxury and belonging, had been motivated by a twisted kind of protection born from decades of watching money corrupt everyone it touched. But protection that required stealing a child from her mother wasn't protection at all. It was just another form of control dressed up in good intentions. As the lawyers handled the paperwork and arrangements were made to return Zara immediately, Marcus approached Sophia in the hallway. I'm sorry, he said simply. For everything. For the years I hurt you, for letting this go as far as it did, for... Why? Sophia interrupted. Why did you finally choose me over her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Because Zara deserves better than what we got. She deserves a mother who fights for her instead of a family that uses her. He looked up with eyes that held genuine regret. And because I realized that loving you meant protecting what makes you who you are, not trying to change it. It was the closest thing to a real apology Sophia had ever received from her childhood tormentor. Not perfect, not enough to erase 20 years of pain, but honest in a way that felt like genuine growth. What happens now? She asked. Rebecca Stone appeared beside them, her briefcase in hand and satisfaction on her face. Now we file criminal charges against Eleanor and Hellen for conspiracy and fraud. Now we pursue your rightful inheritance without anyone trying to steal your daughter. And now you decide what kind of life you want to build. For the first time in days, Sophia felt like she could breathe. The impossible choice, between her daughter and her birthright, between security and authenticity, between family acceptance and self-worth, had been revealed as a false dilemma created by people who needed her to believe she couldn't have both. She could have both. She could be a mother and an heiress. She could claim her inheritance and keep her daughter. She could rewrite the story that 3 generations of family dysfunction had tried to force upon her. The war wasn't over. There would still be legal battles, media attention, and the complex challenge of raising a child with billions of dollars. But for the first time since Martin's death, Sophia felt like she was fighting from a position of strength rather than desperation. She was no longer the unwanted stepdaughter begging for scraps. She was Zara's mother, Sarah's daughter, and the rightful heir to a legacy that no one could take away from her. The impossible choice had become possible the moment she stopped letting other people define what was worth fighting for. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Sophia stood in the marble lobby of Whitman and Associates, holding Zara's hand while Rebecca Stone prepared for the most important legal filing of their lives. The Cromwell inheritance claim was finally going before a federal probate judge, and everything they'd fought for hung in the balance. "Mama, why do we keep going to buildings with angry people?" Zara asked, tugging on Sophia's skirt. "Because sometimes you have to fight for what belongs to you, baby. Even when it's scary?" Sophia knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. Martin's eyes, Sarah's eyes, generations of strength looking back at her. "Especially when it's scary." Rebecca emerged from the elevator with news that changed everything. "Sophia, we have a problem. Eleanor's team filed a countermotion this morning. They're not just challenging your right to inherit, they're claiming the entire inheritance is fraudulent." "What does that mean?" "It means they've found something we missed. Something big enough to convince a federal judge to postpone the hearing until they can present new evidence." The familiar dread crept up Sophia's spine. Just when victory seemed certain, just when she thought the lies had been exposed and justice was within reach, another betrayal emerged from the shadows. "What kind of evidence?" Rebecca's expression was grim. "They're claiming Sarah Cromwell never had the legal right to inherit in the first place. That there was another heir, someone with a stronger claim, who was written out of the will illegally." Before Sophia could process this latest twist, her phone rang. Eleanor's number. "Don't hang up," Eleanor said the moment Sophia answered. "Meet me at Mount Auburn Cemetery in 1 hour. Sarah's grave. Come alone, and bring the original documents your father left you. It's time you learned the truth about your mother. I'm not falling for any more of your..." "Sophia." Eleanor's voice was different now. Broken. Defeated. "I'm calling from jail. My lawyer arranged this one phone call because there are things about Sarah's death you need to know before the hearing tomorrow. Things that will change everything." Against every instinct screaming at her to hang up, Sophia found herself agreeing to the meeting. Rebecca insisted on following at a distance with a security team, but Sophia walked through the cemetery gates alone, carrying the metal box of documents and a growing sense that nothing she believed about her mother's story was true. Eleanor stood beside Sarah's headstone wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, flanked by 2 federal marshals. The elegant woman who'd welcomed Sophia into her mansion was gone, replaced by someone who looked every one of her 73 years. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would after everything I've done." "What do you want, Eleanor?" "I want to tell you why your mother really left the Cromwell family, and why she made me promise to keep the truth buried until you were old enough to handle it." Eleanor gestured to the headstone, where fresh flowers had been placed recently. "Sarah didn't run away because the family was racist, Sophia. She ran because she discovered something that would have destroyed the Cromwell reputation forever." "What are you talking about?" "Your grandfather, Alexander Cromwell, built his fortune on more than just railroads and investments. He was part of a conspiracy that diverted federal infrastructure funds into private accounts for 50 years. Billions of dollars that were supposed to build public works projects ended up in Cromwell family trusts." The words landed like physical blows. "You're saying the inheritance is stolen money?" "I'm saying your mother spent 2 years gathering evidence to expose the conspiracy. She was going to testify before Congress, turn over all the financial records, and destroy our family to serve justice." Eleanor's voice cracked. "But she never got the chance." Ice water flooded Sophia's veins. "What do you mean she never got the chance?" Eleanor met her eyes with an expression of such profound guilt that Sophia understood before the words were spoken. "Your mother didn't die from leukemia, Sophia. She was poisoned." The cemetery spun around her. Sophia gripped the nearest headstone to keep from falling as 24 years of carefully constructed reality crumbled into dust. "We found out she was going to testify. The family was terrified of losing everything. Not just the money, but the reputation, the political connections, generations of influence built on theft." Eleanor's tears were falling freely now. "I didn't know they were going to kill her. I swear to God, I thought they were just going to discredit her, make her look unstable." But when she got sick so suddenly, when the doctor said leukemia, you knew. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. You knew my mother was murdered, and you said nothing. I was 19 years old and terrified. They told me if I ever spoke up, they'd kill Martin and you too. So I kept quiet, and I've been carrying that guilt for 25 years. The betrayal was so complete, so generational, that Sophia couldn't even process the scope of it. Her mother hadn't just been killed, she'd been killed to protect stolen money. Money that Sophia was now fighting to inherit. But that's not the worst part, Eleanor continued. The worst part is what your mother did before she died. She knew they were going to kill her, Sophia. The last week of her life, she changed everything. Eleanor pulled a manila envelope from beneath her jumpsuit, somehow smuggled past the federal marshals. She wrote a new will. A letter. Instructions for how to expose the conspiracy and return the stolen money to the government. She left it all for you to find when you were old enough to carry out her mission. Sophia opened the envelope with trembling hands and found pages of her mother's handwriting, dated just days before her death. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're finally old enough to finish what I started. The Cromwell fortune is built on theft, and every dollar we inherit is stolen from the American people. But within that fortune are also the records, the evidence, the paper trail that can expose 50 years of federal fraud and return billions to where they belong. I'm leaving you the choice I never got to make. Keep the money and live with the knowledge of how it was earned, or use it to serve justice and become the woman I always knew you could be. Either way, you are loved beyond measure. Either way, you are my greatest pride. Choose wisely, my brave girl. Choose with your heart. All my love forever, Mom. Sophia read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. Her mother had been a whistleblower, a woman willing to sacrifice everything, her family, her fortune, her life, to expose corruption and serve justice. And now that choice belonged to Sophia. Tomorrow's hearing isn't just about inheritance, Eleanor said quietly. It's about whether you're going to claim blood money or honor your mother's sacrifice by exposing the truth. Sophia looked at her mother's grave, at the woman who died trying to do the right thing, and felt something shift inside her chest. All this time, she'd been fighting for money, for security, for the recognition that she deserved something valuable. But what she actually deserved was the chance to finish her mother's work. If I expose the conspiracy, what happens to the inheritance? It goes back to the federal government, where it belongs. You get nothing except the knowledge that you did what your mother died trying to do. And if I don't? Eleanor's smile was sad and knowing. Then you become another Cromwell, inheriting wealth built on other people's suffering. You become exactly what your mother died fighting against. As the marshals led Eleanor away, Sophia sat beside her mother's grave and finally understood the choice that had been waiting for her all along. Not between family and inheritance, not between security and authenticity, but between justice and greed. Between finishing her mother's mission or perpetuating the corruption that had killed her. Tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom and make the decision that would define not just her future, but her daughter's legacy. The federal courthouse in Boston was packed with reporters, government officials, and 3 generations of Cromwell family members who'd spent the night frantically trying to destroy evidence. Sophia walked through the media gauntlet holding Zara's hand, her mother's letter folded in her jacket pocket like a talisman. Judge Henderson called the court to order, his weathered face grave as he reviewed the mountain of evidence that had been submitted overnight. This case has evolved far beyond a simple inheritance dispute. We're now dealing with allegations of federal fraud spanning 50 years, conspiracy, and murder. Rebecca Stone stood to address the court. Your Honor, my client has made a decision that we believe honors both the law and her mother's memory. We're withdrawing our claim to the Cromwell inheritance. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The Cromwell family lawyers looked stunned, while government prosecutors leaned forward with sharp interest. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Ms. Robinson is turning over all evidence of the federal fraud conspiracy to the Department of Justice, including financial records, correspondence, and her mother's complete investigation files. Sophia stood slowly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Your Honor, I've learned that my mother died trying to expose corruption that stole billions from the American people. I can in good conscience claim money that was built on that theft. She pulled out Sarah's letter and held it up for the court to see. My mother wrote that she was leaving me a choice: keep the money or serve justice. I choose justice. The next 6 hours changed everything. Federal agents arrested 12 people connected to the conspiracy, including several sitting congressmen and 3 Supreme Court justices who'd been receiving Cromwell family bribes for decades. The evidence Sarah had died trying to expose triggered the largest federal corruption investigation in American history. Eleanor was sentenced to 5 years for conspiracy and fraud, but her cooperation with federal investigators reduced her time to 18 months. As the marshals led her away, she stopped beside Sophia in the hallway. Your mother would be so proud, Eleanor whispered. Sarah always said you had her courage. I just never believed anyone could be that brave. Hellen faced charges for forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The last time Sophia saw her, she was being led away in handcuffs, screaming about ungrateful children and stolen lives. Marcus visited her in prison once, then never again. But the most surprising resolution came 3 months later, when Marcus knocked on the door of Sophia's new apartment, purchased with a federal whistleblower reward that ensured Zara would never want for anything. I wanted to give you this, he said, holding out a small velvet box. Inside was Sarah's engagement ring, the one Martin had given her, the one Hellen had hidden away for 25 years. Mom kept it in her jewelry box, said it was too painful to look at, but too valuable to throw away. Marcus's smile was sad but genuine. Turns out she was right about the valuable part, but not in the way she thought. Sophia slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling her mother's presence like a warm embrace. What will you do now? Rebuild the construction company the right way. Pay back everyone Mom stole from. Maybe figure out how to be the brother you deserved instead of the one I was. They weren't a family in any traditional sense. Too much pain, too many years of learned cruelty to simply forgive and forget. But they were something new. 2 people choosing to be better than the family that raised them. 6 months after the trial, Sophia stood in the auditorium of the Sarah Cromwell Center for Government Ethics, watching Zara play with blocks in the corner, while federal prosecutors used their donated space to train new whistleblower investigators. Mama, Zara looked up with her grandfather's eyes. Tell me the story about great-grandma Sarah again. Sophia knelt beside her daughter, smoothing dark curls that would never know the shame of being told they didn't belong. Once upon a time, there was a woman who chose to do the right thing even when it was scary. Like you did. Like we both did, baby. She started it, and I finished it. And now the bad people can't steal anymore? That's right. And now little girls like you grow up knowing that doing the right thing matters more than having the most money. Zara nodded solemnly, then returned to her blocks, building something that looked like a castle or maybe a courthouse, structures of protection and justice rising from her small hands. Rebecca Stone approached with a stack of legal documents. The federal government wants to hire you as a consultant for their new anti-corruption task force. Full benefits, excellent salary, and you'd be helping to investigate cases just like your mother's. It was perfect. Work that mattered, using her experience to protect other families from the corruption that had stolen so much from her own. A career built on justice instead of inherited wealth, legacy instead of luck. There's something else, Rebecca continued with a smile. A documentary crew wants to tell your mother's story. The woman who died for justice. They think it could help other whistleblowers find the courage to come forward. Sophia looked around the center that bore her mother's name, at the federal agents training to catch corruption, at the photographs of Sarah hanging on the walls. Not as a victim, but as a hero whose sacrifice had changed everything. This was the inheritance that actually mattered. Not money, but mission. Not wealth, but worth. Not what her family could give her, but what she could give the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the news about the documentary. Dad would have been so proud of both his girls. Sarah for starting the fight, and you for finishing it. For the first time since Martin's death, Sophia felt truly at peace. She'd lost the fortune but found her purpose. She'd sacrificed the inheritance but gained her integrity. She'd given up being a Cromwell heiress to become something more important. Her mother's daughter in every way that counted. As evening fell over Boston, Sophia and Zara walked home through streets lit by hope and possibility. They would never be the richest family in America, but they would always be the ones who chose courage over comfort, justice over greed, love over money. Behind them, the Sarah Cromwell Center for Government Ethics glowed like a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that some inheritances couldn't be stolen, corrupted, or destroyed. Some legacies lived forever in the hearts of daughters brave enough to carry them forward. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world. The story of Sophia Robinson was complete, not as the victim of family cruelty, but as the victor who'd transformed inherited pain into purposeful power, choosing to honor her mother's sacrifice by ensuring that no other family would suffer what theirs had endured. Love had won. Justice had prevailed. And somewhere in the Boston sunset, Sarah Cromwell's spirit finally rested in peace, knowing her daughter had finished what she died trying to accomplish. What do you think was Sophia's most important choice in this journey? Claiming her inheritance or choosing justice over money? How would you have handled discovering that your family's wealth came from corruption? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.